Hello, everyone, and welcome to Bulgaria's first podcast festival. It's great to see people from near and far, and I'm very glad to know that you're spending this evening with us, or it might be morning, depending where in the world you are. This event is organized by the Association of European Journalists in Bulgaria, and it is supported by the Friedrich Naumann Foundation and America for Bulgaria Foundation. We are very grateful for your support and that you support the association's efforts when it comes to improving media freedom in the country and organizing events like this festival. Don't forget that this is the first day of the festival, but altogether we have prepared 5 days of celebration of podcast creators, and hopefully you'll meet some of your favorite producers, podcast hosts, etc. We've tried our best to offer a variety of topics as well as speakers. We'll have talks, workshops, and panel discussions. If you're here, there's no need to explain what podcasts and podcasting is. Just very briefly, audio is basically a very intimate medium, and it creates a very intimate relationship with its listeners. I myself, I'm a big podcast lover, and there have been multiple occasions where maybe some strangers on the street have thought that this woman is crazy because I have been listening to a podcast, and depending on the topic, I've been laughing or sometimes even crying. So that's the power of podcasting, and that's what we'll try to offer you during those 5 days until November 22nd. I won't bore you much with long speeches, etc. Just a few housekeeping tips before we continue. For those of you, for the Bulgarians in the audience who will need translation in Bulgarian, please select the interpretation on your Zoom menu and click on the Bulgarian channel. If you are a social media addict and you want to tweet or post about the festival, please use the hashtags Listen Up as well as Podcast Festival. We'll love you to see your posts later. And before we continue with our first speaker, I just want to give the floor to Martin Cote. He is the Regional Director of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Southeastern Europe, and he would like to say a few words to you.
Thanks, Bojana, and hi everybody. I'm really happy to be with you here tonight. And in fact, it is a total vindication for me to be opening this podcast festival. And I think you couldn't have found a person better suited than me doing it. Let me just explain why, and maybe you understand somewhat. I myself am a former radio journalist working for the BBC and Deutsche Welle. That's way back in the 80s. Now, I don't know if any of you might recall this 80s smash hit, Video Killed the Radio Star. It was played a lot on MTV back then, when MTV was hot. My point is, the line is just not true. It wasn't video that killed the radio star. It was radio management that killed the radio star. That's because radio managers back then invented format radio, telling us journalists that audience attention would only last for 2 or 3 minutes and that listeners would only take in tiny bits of information at a time. This killed radio as the medium of ideas, the best place available in the world, I find, to take in information, learn, confront yourself with your own prejudice, just listen and feel your mind broadening its horizon. Mind you, I really believe this is actually a sensual and you said intimate experience, Boriana, and I really totally agree with it. And those managers, they just killed it. But it's back now, and these days it's called podcast. None of these managers would have ever thought this had a chance. But now you're back the world over. Now, you might call yourself podcasters, but to me, you guys still are radio stars, and I'm so proud of you. I'm also proud of IAG of Bulgaria, who made it all happen. And it's just great to have such partners. Thanks a million. So, hey, you realize it, I feel great satisfaction. And with this, I officially declare this podcast festival open. Have fun. I will disappear from the screen, but I will stay tuned in.
Thank you so much, Martin. And thank you for the kind words. And I very much agree with you that we have a lot of podcast stars tonight and for the rest of the festival. And I think this first speaker, and I'm so excited. I mean, as a podcast junkie myself, I'm so excited that we have this person with us tonight. And to be honest, he doesn't need any introductions, but I'll just want to tell you a very short story. So he basically 10 years ago, he was doing a PhD in history of science, and he has this favorite podcast show called Radiolab. He knew he wasn't going to have an academic career, so on a whim, he decided that he's gonna email his favorite podcast. And to his surprise, one of the producers at Radiolab actually replied to his email. And then they invited him for a phone call and to discuss some story ideas that he had. Unfortunately, they didn't like any of them. Then he kept pitching, and they didn't like the next batch of story ideas either. But he persevered and was very persistent. A little bit like me emailing him before this podcast festival and inviting him to be one of the speakers. Anyway, fast forward to 2014. He had one of his pitches accepted about a robot, and he finished grad school, and then he landed his dream job actually and become a member of the Radiolab team, and then he became director of research. And if we fast forward again to September 2020, just a few months ago, Latif Nasser was promoted to become one of the hosts of Radiolab. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Latif tonight. Hello, Latif.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And actually, good morning. I'm so thrilled that you decided to have your morning coffee with us, because it's 8:38 in Los Angeles, and he got up early, especially for us. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me be the kickoff to your wonderful festival. I'm so excited. The lineup looks so good, both for the people that I know and even more so for the people that I don't. Really wonderful, so exciting. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. The pleasure is all ours. Just again, a few housekeeping things before we go on. If you have questions for Latif, please use the Q&A section in Zoom while we're talking. At the end of our conversation, we'll have time and we'll answer some of them. Well, he will answer some of them. Again, as director of research and before becoming a co-host of Radiolab, he had explored a variety of topics. But tonight, we'll talk about a mini-series that was broadcasted earlier this year. It's called The Other Latif, and it basically tells the story about this Moroccan man who ended up in Guantanamo Bay, this notorious prison. And he spent almost 20 years there. So we'll focus the conversation on that. Again, welcome, Latif. And well, I want to start with, so who is this other Latif?
Yeah, well, that's sort of the central mystery of the entire series, and that's also the kind of initial question that I had, that and kind of the engine of the reporting, the thing that kept me wanting to find out more. So the way it all started was I was on Twitter, and I saw somebody tweeting about me to the President of the United States, and I was like, that's weird. That doesn't make, why would this? And it was a law firm, and I was like, I've never even heard of, I don't really know anything about this. Like, and they were tweeting that like I ought to be released, and I was like, what are you talking about? And sort of the more I looked into it, I realized, first of all, the first thing that it took me a second to realize, because I'm a little slow, is that it was not about me. It was about another guy with my same name, and that this guy was currently at Guantanamo, and had been at Guantanamo basically since the beginning, since 2002. And I just, like, all of a sudden, exactly the question you had, who is this guy? I needed to know everything about him. How is it that a guy with my name was at Guantanamo? Who was this guy? And I quickly found, kind of the first thing I found was this, when I Googled him, first my results came up, and I was like, oh, that's not good. But then I found this WikiLeaks DoD file about him that had kind of a rap sheet, a pretty serious list of charges of things that this guy had done. That he was Al-Qaeda's top explosives expert. He was an important advisor to Osama bin Laden. That he had personally helped destroy the Bamiyan Buddha statues, which are this UNESCO World Heritage Site. Just a very, very damning list of charges, which made me just think, oh wow, this man is sort of a monster. And then sort of soon thereafter, I got in touch with his lawyer, who told me basically the exact opposite, that he was never in Al-Qaeda. He did not know Osama bin Laden, or at least did not have a relationship with him. That he had been sold to the United States for a bounty, that he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that that in fact, in addition to never having had formal charges or a trial, in fact, on the contrary, the United States government had unanimously agreed to release him in 2016, and then refused to do so. And so all of a sudden, like, I had these two stark portraits of this guy, and this sort of kind of like he was in this legal void. And there were just so few pieces of evidence about him, and they were all contradictory. And just again, it goes right back to your question, like, who was this guy? I needed to find out more.
Yeah, by the way, if you haven't listened to the miniseries, I advise you right after we finish with this first podcast evening to go and binge listen to it. But yeah, as you mentioned, this story was shrouded in mystery, and you wanted to know more. But at the same time, there was classified documents that you didn't have access to. Actually, one of his lawyers, Shelby, she keeps saying classified, classified, classified over and over again. And there were several obstacles for you finding more information. What kept you going? Didn't you discourage at some point to say, enough is enough? I can't figure out whether he's this evil person that the U.S. government is presenting, or he's innocent.
Yeah, it was extraordinarily frustrating. I mean, I as a journalist, I'm used to sort of digging. But mostly the kinds of stories I do are sort of science stories, where there are scientists who are sort of very willing to talk. They're not, in fact, the problem is they give you too much information. They say, oh, well, let me hedge this with that. And, but in this case, like, there were just drips and crumbs of this guy's life that I would find. And they would be, even when I would find them, even if I did find a way to get around this classified thing, you know, I put in all of these, in the United States, we have these like freedom of information requests. So I would put these in, and you hear nothing, but I'm still waiting. They haven't come in. And so I would keep hitting this wall. My producers and I was working with some producers, Susie Lechtenberg, Sarah Kari, and we would keep hitting these walls. And they were very frustrating. And the thing that did make us keep going was it just felt so absurd. It felt like something medieval, you know, where someone gets thrown in a prison cell and the door locked, and then you just don't really hear from them for 20 years. That's not something that should happen in the modern world, especially in a country that sort of so prizes justice and due process as the United States. The idea that the closest thing that this guy was getting to a trial was me and my fellow producers sort of just noodling around and trying to like find whatever information we could get. Like that just it felt so egregious. And then personally for me, so that was kind of in a sort of a, I don't know, these national ideals felt betrayed, and that was sort of in a big picture way. But in a small picture way, I just wanted to know, like, it was unsettling and eerie and creepy for somebody with my name to be in this place, Guantanamo, that is, I think for most Muslim Americans, like that's like really their worst nightmare. And for this guy to be there with my name, it sort of, in a way, it made me realize, oh, wait a second, like you could equally well be there. And if you were, you would want people to care and wonder how you got there and what you're doing there and why. And so given that we had that doubt, like I feel like I needed to find out more for myself. Like, how did this guy wind up there? And was it sort of proportional to something that he did, or was this kind of a government that just ran right over, just was sort of drunk with power and sort of just threw a guy away. And in a way, like both of those stories, there are examples of both of those stories kind of out there. And so it was kind of like, which story is this? Which kind of person is this guy? And and what should happen to this guy? Where should this guy be? Kind of just piecing through all of that. It was just too unsettling to leave on the table. I feel like we just kept coming back to it because we kept needing some kind of resolution. It was too unsettling, you know?
You already mentioned Abdul Latif actually never got a trial, let alone a fair trial. Did it feel weird for you as a journalist to be in a position where you might be the person who knows best this case? Or even, I mean, at some point through one of his lawyers, he sends you a message saying, tell him to let his name out of Guantanamo. How do you feel knowing that this person is relying on you about decisions that are not in your area of expertise?
Yeah, it was so strange, and it kept getting, as we reported, it kept getting that level of strangeness and that level of pressure kept building in a way, like as we realized, oh, wait a second, he didn't get a trial, and the closest thing to a trial within the government system that he had, which was this kind of parole-like hearing called the PRB, he passed that. He won that. He basically got cleared through that process. So he had exhausted, in a way, his legal road. And I think for him, potentially, his law firm, potentially, or some mix of them, I think they felt like because they didn't have the court of public opinion was sort of their next best thing. And the fact that I was one of the few, sometimes one of the, like maybe the only journalist who was interested in this guy, like, I think it was like, all of a sudden it was like, oh, wow, okay, now this pressure, like, yeah, I think they felt that kind of pressure. And I was trying much more to be a sort of, an objective journalist to say, or like a kind of a reasonably fair journalist to say, look, I don't actually know what this guy did. I'm not rooting for his, necessarily for his release, until I kind of see evidence that takes me there. But then the other thing was that I went to along with my producer Susie Lechtenberg, we went to visit his family in Morocco, and for them as well to put even more pressure on, to say, like, look, like, we want our brother back, and to treat me because I had the same name, and not just that, I kind of, to their eyes, I look like their brother. I'm his height, I'm his build, I was the age when they last saw him. There were all these things. When they saw me, just one of his sisters just started to weep, and they kind of started considering me their family. And for me, I was, no story I'd ever done up until that point, and even still, have I been sort of kind of like personally implicated in that way, where I'm like, oh, it's, this family saw me as one of them. And then for me to kind of keep trying to sort of report as honestly, as fairly as I can, while at the same time, like, this family considers me one of them, and they think that I'm their best shot at getting their brother back. That's like a lot of pressure. So there was that pressure kind of to be the judge and the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney, and the jury, all at the same time, like, and the pressure just got, it kept ratcheting up.
Right, and just for the journalists in the audience, I just want to say you basically devoted 3 years of your life investigating these stories. As you mentioned, you went to Morocco to visit Abdul Latif's family. You went to Sudan, to the sunflower fields of Sudan, where he had worked allegedly for Osama bin Laden, etc. You visit Guantanamo Bay. That's a lot of hard work. But what was the most challenging part for you during those 3 years?
Well, let me say two quick things. One that Sudan, we actually didn't go to Sudan. We had local journalists kind of doing some work in Sudan for us, which was very incredibly helpful. And they were really invaluable. Maki was his name. And then in addition, I also have to say, like for me to spend 3 years on a project is one thing, sort of in my own head, but also we had tremendous amount of support from our station to send us to all these places, to let us sit for that long with one story. It was a tremendous amount of support that we got, and at the same time, kind of an editorial freedom to say, okay, we're going to pay for all this stuff, but you just do it however you want to do it. So we were very, very lucky in that respect. I think that's an immense luxury as a journalist to have that. Wait, repeat your question. Sorry.
What was the biggest challenge during the reporting phase, or even after?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge just constantly is, how do you build a 6-episode podcast, effectively 6 hours, without the main character, never hearing the voice of the main character. I still have never heard his voice. And how do you do that? You can't ask him questions. The only person you can ask about him is his lawyer, who is very, very guarded in what she can say. She's careful in what she wants to say and how she wants to portray him. So it was a really difficult thing to try to triangulate, like, here's this one very flattering story to him that makes him look like a totally innocent, even a noble aid worker type person, and then here's another picture of this guy who makes him look like a really malevolent extremist. And then it's like, how do I, you know, in a normal interview, you sit down with the person and you say, okay, look, like, why did you do this? Well, like, this people see it this way. This people see it this way. What were you thinking at the time? Why would you have done that? But you can't do that at all. And so to have a whole, in a way, it was a creative challenge and a puzzle for all of us, for me and my colleagues at Radiolab who were building it, because it was like, yeah, like we had never done such a thing before. How do you build something so big around, you know, like it's all built on top of this one Jenga piece, and that Jenga piece isn't even there. So you're just like, how do we even do that? So it was a major challenge that was with us every step along the way.
Right. And so far we discussed the journalistic side and the reporting side of this story. But for me as a listener, it was interesting. Abdul Latif is not just your namesake. You don't just share this unique name. You also have similar family and religious backgrounds. I mean, you face similar personal dilemmas, for example, whether to choose between faith and education and what path for your future to go on. And as well as, you know, this story was unfolding at a time when the news were full of stories of Muslims being persecuted around the world. And of course, you watched this with anxiety. Did it teach you something about yourself? I mean, this whole like overlapping identity story.
Yeah, I think it really, like, in a way, actually, it's funny you mentioned that stuff, because in a way, a lot of that stuff, we really tried to, my own personal stuff, we really tried to use it very purposefully to solve that challenge that I was just talking about, which is that if you have this kind of hole at the middle of the story of this guy that you can't talk to, what we figured out early on is, because of the name coincidence and because of these sort of life similarities, we could use my story to sort of make this guy, this abstraction of a guy, to make him more vivid and relatable and personal. And that was very helpful. So I had never gone personal in a way. I'd never talked about myself in any story that I'd done, you know, for the preceding 10 years. And then all of a sudden, this one, it was like I needed to use myself in a story, in a mechanical way, to literally be able to tell this story. And then as soon as I did, once that kind of barn door was open, like I started really projecting harder and harder, and imagining myself in this guy's shoes and him in my shoes, and imagining kind of I think it really makes you, for me at least, it really made me think about the kind of the level of agency we have in our own lives, you know, the decisions that we make and how much they're in our power, and how much they're sort of sculpted by forces that are bigger than us, that are of our moment, that are of our time. You know, the way, exactly as you say, the way that, like, growing up at this moment, to be a Muslim growing up at this moment, and actually I kind of feel the same way about this moment we're living in right now, but like, to open the newspaper and see, you know, stories of Bosnians and Afghanis, and, you know, or just, you know, today, like Rohingya and Uyghurs, and like, it's like you see these stories all over the news, and you think, wow, what is, you know, that it seems that really deeply shaped Abdul Latif Nasser's life. And in a different way, I think it really shaped mine, growing up, kind of seeing all of that. And I think that there's, yeah, you just kind of, I feel like it's sort of reconceived my sense of where the kind of boundary is between my own personal agency and the kind of the really, like, turbulent, chaotic world all around us.
And I just want to follow up on that. I mean, you mentioned that you avoid the first person in storytelling, but at least to me, in this case, well, and also like getting personal, it's quite often controversial in journalism. But in this case, at least to me, I think you struck the perfect balance of telling us Abdul Latif's story and at the same time exploring these identity questions about your own life, without navel gazing like too much. Right. How do you, speaking about boundaries, how do you manage not to cross that fine line between the two?
You know, it's very funny because it was like tactical how we decided when to use certain parts of my story and not. And what we would always do is like, because we knew kind of in general the shape we were thinking, and in a way it basically followed that original WikiLeaks Department of Defense report that we found. It was like, you know, they had a kind of a story of his life, and it was saying, okay, there's a paragraph on Morocco, paragraph on Sudan, paragraph on Afghanistan. And so we, in a way, we sort of cribbed that structure because it just was a tidy structure and a clean one. And there were sort of charges in each of them and kind of interesting personal moments in each of them. And then what I tried to do is kind of like fill in like, oh, how does my story, what are the questions I most have about this guy? Like, why did he move there? Why would he have done this? Why wouldn't he have stayed with his family? What did it mean for him to go? What was he trying to do? Like to try to take those questions that I had for him, that sometimes I had evidence about from his family or from these reports or from his lawyer or wherever, and then piecing that together. And then there, like if you just did it like that, you could see just plainly in the storyboard, you know, in the structure, in the outlines, oh, this is extremely unsatisfying. It's really, there's not enough information here to feel like you're getting a full emotional portrait of a human being. And then it was those moments where you see those little holes, and it's like, oh, you know, that reminds me of a time when I was a kid, and my parents, or the time when you know, my dad was volunteering, or you know, this or that or the other thing, or when I was listening to the Red Hot Chili Peppers or whatever it was, right? And it's just like very much, I think, like we were very actively trying not to lead with me, but to lead with him, and then to help me kind of accent or shade in moments that felt especially kind of mysterious. And one of the other very helpful things was I would like stay up all night and I would write, you know, knowing the structure, I would like write a big long like essay about like, oh, this reminds me of this time when I was a kid and I was eating this thing and and then I would, in the morning, I would turn it over to my fellow reporters and producers, Sarah Kari and Susie Lechtenberg, and they would be like, and also my editors, Soren Wheeler and Jad Abumrad. They were quite savage. They would just cut stuff, and it was good, exactly for the reason you say. Like, you don't want it to be navel-gazing. It's not a vanity project about me. This is a kind of, there is a person there, and even though we can't access him, you know, we like, that's a really important thing to remember. And my story is just helping us access him, as opposed to being kind of its own center of gravity, you know. And keeping that vision, and also having outside people who could keep that vision, and keep me honest in a way, that really helped us walk that line. Because I agree with you, there's a lot of stories that you hear and you're like, why are you talking about yourself? Like, just, yeah, I want to hear less about you, and I want to hear more about the story. And hopefully we tried to find that balance.
I think you did a good job, and plus, I think one of the morals here is it's important to have good editors, even when they make you kill your babies, as we say in journalism.
Exactly, I wholeheartedly agree.
Just to remind the audience, please send your questions to Latif in the Q&A section. We'll start in a bit with them. And just briefly, did you have a feeling at some point that you're losing yourself in the story, chasing the truth about Abdul Latif?
Yeah, there was one moment in particular that I can think of. We didn't even, I don't know why we didn't use this tape, because it was good tape. I was interviewing a congressman, so like a pretty big, deal politically, a retired congressman, but he had been a congressman in the United States for a long time, and was head of, I think he was head of some very defense committee or something like that. But he, a very esteemed, respected man. And he was basically part of there were very obscure, abstract, technical rules that I was trying to understand, because those were the technical rules that got this guy snarled after the US government had agreed to basically to release him home. There were these technicalities that he got stuck on, and then was the reason that he remained in Guantanamo. And I was trying to understand these technicalities. Why were they there? Were they sort of political moves? Were they about actually national security, as a lot of people alleged? Were they just, some people say that they weren't even political, they weren't even national security. It was just something vindictive that the Republican, politicians were trying to kind of get at President Obama at the time. So there were different things, and I was trying to get to this politician. I was trying to ask him, like, these technical rules about releasing Guantanamo detainees, like, why this rule, why this rule, why this rule? And I kept asking him, and I was sort of, I think, sort of badgering him, and he basically said, you're like, stop, like, you have this guy's name, you have like, you've lost yourself in him. I forget the exact phrase he used, but it was something like, you've lost yourself in him, you've lost your objectivity, you think you're this guy has your name, and you're getting carried away, and just like he basically scolded me. And it's funny because so I was alone doing the interview, but my producer Susie was on the line as well, and afterwards I was shaken, because I was like scolded by this older, very dignified politician, and my producer was like, he, like, I hate to tell you, but like, he was kind of right. Like, in that moment, I did sort of go over the line. There was a moment where I sort of lost myself in it, and I was like, oh. And what I tried to do in this series was kind of, although to be fair and to present, like, and which we did, all of the most damning evidence, everything we found, really, kind of warts and all, but at the same time, kind of be clear and open-hearted in the way that I was pulling for this guy to be innocent, and even though that, it was more complicated than I ever could have imagined or hoped, and it was, that I found evidence that was quite damning, sort of, and independent of the US government. I was still pulling the whole time for him to be innocent. And I think there were times where I sort of lost myself, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that was too far, and I need to kind of check myself and remind myself, like, what I'm actually trying to do here, and that how important it is to be fair, and I'm not his lawyer, and I really, that's very important, that I'm not his lawyer.
And speaking of government, and me being born and raised in a part of the world where corruption or rule of law is a big issue, and we also, let's say, the United States is presented as this liberal country where democracy is flourishing, etc., etc. And you, while reporting on this story, you are amidst applying for US citizenship. I don't know if many of our attendees know, but you're Canadian. So given this lack of a trial, you mentioned earlier maybe having a government drunk on power and sending somebody to prison on a technicality, or not releasing him for that reason. What does this story tell us about America, like, now?
Yeah, I feel like I was so, because I was becoming a citizen. My wife was born in the United States. Both my kids who were born here and are citizens. So I was like, oh, I guess I need to become a citizen. And sort of as I was thinking about that, going through that, and I wanted to become a citizen for a long time because I believe in a lot of the kind of bedrock American ideals. And it's funny, like you say that, it's so right. Like I feel like this country is such a, I mean, it just constantly sort of punches you in the face with it, with how paradoxical and opposite it is. You know, it's like, this is the country where, you know, just in the last few days, like they announced that there are 2 very promising COVID vaccines, but it's also the like, and here, like that's where they're doing the research. And then also here are people who don't wear masks and say that it doesn't exist, as they're, say that COVID doesn't exist, as they're like gulping for air in the ICU. Like this country contains both. It contains, you know, a regime that is separating children and putting them in cages at the border, and then it also includes, you know, the Broadway musical Hamilton, you know, where immigrants get the job done, and it's like the cast of the Founding Fathers in this multiracial, team. It just is such a paradox, and this is kind of, it seems like really one of them, you know, where it's this moment where the United States does hold itself, and I think in times, sometimes admirably, to giving due process, to making sure everybody gets a fair trial. That's very, very important. That's kind of the cornerstone, not just of the United States, of modern countries. And for the United States to take that so seriously, that's good and right. And then also for this country to be a place where there is effectively a prison that they created in a place off the map, where in particular where laws don't apply, and where they can send people and let them kind of rot basically for 20 years. Like that's the same country. It's so complicated, but that's this country, you know. And I think that signing up for it, for me, I think I was trying to sign up for not the best, not the worst, that things that are actually happening, but the ideals, you know, like the ideals that this man should get a trial, and that even though he is locked away, that there are people working feverishly to basically smush the Constitution in the face of anybody who is arguing to keep this guy there, and to keep him in that, and the 39 other guys in this legal limbo. And I hope that they close down Guantanamo. I do. But yeah, I don't know. It shouldn't have been started in the first place, but I hope they do close it. And I do think that there is something about those ideals. There's a sort of a power and a muscularity to them, and an insistence and an ability to shout it out with the First Amendment that makes this country special and worth kind of being a part of. I don't know. Sorry for rambling a little while there.
No, it was quite interesting, and there is a lot to outline with those paradoxes in place.
It's just I see it everywhere. The paradoxes of this country. It's you couldn't sort of turn the contrasts up any higher, you know.
And yeah, I mean, given the recent election, trust us, we can all see it while we're obsessively refreshing our browsers before the election results. But actually, for Abdul Latif, this past election, something very important might be different and important might be at stake. It might be his freedom. Do you think that now there will be a new administration? Do you think he'll be released?
I think it is promising. I think it is, well, certainly compared to had there been a second Trump administration, that the likelihood would have been zero. Now with President-elect Biden, there's definitely a chance. And to be fair, I mean, the last crack he had during the Obama-Biden administration, they still didn't manage to get close Guantanamo as they promised. They didn't manage to get even a guy like Abdul Latif Nasser, whom they had cleared to be sent home. They still didn't get him out. So it's not a sure thing. I imagine, just knowing the political realities, freeing a prisoner who can't vote and whom a majority of the country believes to be a evil terrorist in some way responsible for 9/11, despite the fact that he wasn't. I think that's not a political there's a lot of political capital that it may take to do that. And while he was campaigning, President-elect Biden said that he would, reaffirmed, which surprised me and kind of some of the people I talked to, that he would have said that he still wants to close Guantanamo. So there seems to be will there, but there are a lot of potentially, like, to close Guantanamo, there are a lot of political hurdles. It seems to be to release Abdul Latif Nasser. It actually does not require the cooperation of Congress or any other. I mean, I guess they would have to. I'm not sure the technicals about it. I'm actually very soon going to talk to this week. I'm going to talk to all of the folks basically we interviewed in the story to be like, what do you think is about to happen? But I do think that the chances are existent, and I might even say good, that he will be returned to Morocco.
I spy maybe a follow-up episode, maybe.
Yes.
Sometime.
Oh, definitely. I've told both my family and my Radiolab team that if and when this guy gets released, I'm going to be on the first plane to Casablanca to greet him on the other side and to finally do that interview that I feel like I've been waiting for 4 years now.
Or just actually, I have a zillion more questions, of course, but and this was one of them. And I think there is one question from the audience on that. During the ministers, you also say that you were fantasizing of interviewing him. What would you ask him? How would you imagine this meeting unfolding?
I just would want, really, like, I feel like I've talked about him for 6 hours. I think I'd want to shut up and I'd say, just tell me your story. Tell me your story from the beginning. Just tell it to me as you remember it, as you lived it. Why did you move to so many places? What were you doing in Afghanistan? How has the last 20 years, what is your experience like being at Guantanamo? What do you think about the United States? What do you, what do you want to do next? I think I am kind of, I feel like, and partly because of the name thing, but also partly now because of all this reporting that I've done, I'm kind of invested in this person, and I want to know more about him, and kind of in the richly complex way that I'm sure is going to buck all of my assumptions, and I'm sure I got some things wrong, and I'm sure it's going to be a much more kind of complicated and nuanced story that's not going to be what his lawyer said, that's not going to be what the government said. I'm sure it's going to be some kind of something I probably didn't even imagine, and so I just want to shut up, and I just want to let him tell his story and to hear what actually happened. I mean, certainly, he might be spinning me this way or another, but just to hear his story and to kind of see him, look him in the face as he tells it, I think that'll be very valuable, and I think hopefully it will satisfy a lot of the curiosity that I have.
Yeah, oftentimes, that's why nonfiction is much more interesting than fiction, because you cannot imitate life, basically.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you some of the questions that audience members send us. So this is Slava
Please.
Milkova is asking, do you think living the story with all the challenges to objectivity makes reporting better? And did that impose an even higher responsibility on your work?
Yeah, I think it does, in the way that sort of being so personal, I feel like you're on the line in a much more extreme way. Like to use like, for me to start and say, this is a story about my name, and this is a story about, it's about this guy, but I'm going to use myself to help you learn about this guy. In a way, what I'm sort of saying in saying that is that if 20 other expert, perhaps even more expert than me, journalists were to do this story, they would do it differently. Like, I'm going to do this story very differently than anybody else would. And in that way, you're kind of putting yourself sort of out on a limb in a different way. You are kind of responsible in a different way. And to me, that, I mean, it's not that, like, I still do the same amount of fact checking, and, I try to be as rigorous about sourcing and things like that as I can, and as I would be on any other story. But it does seem like there's a piece of a much bigger piece of me that's kind of on the table, and a much bigger piece of me that, where and in a way, because part of the engine of the show, and the idea of the series is to ask the listeners to sort of make their own judgments and come to their, but in a way, it's not just him that they're going to be judging, they're going to be judging me too, in a way, based by virtue of the fact that I'm putting myself out there. So yeah, it just brings up a whole other set of questions for the listener, and for me, some other sensitivities. It was very difficult. Whether it makes the sort of final product better, I think in this case it does. To say it in a blanket way, I'm not totally sure. I feel like it really depends on the kind of reporting you do, but I do think that it gives it a kind of authenticity, and it gives it a kind of earnest and honestness that makes me want to listen to it more. Like, I feel like that's when I find stories like that, or series like that, or episodes like that of any show, like those are the times when I want to listen more, when you feel like the person telling you the story has something riding on it, where there's something, sort of some piece of their heart that is in that story. It really makes it more engrossing. I don't know if it makes it better journalism or not. I think that's a kind of an open question, and sort of a touchy-feely kind of question. But to me, it certainly makes it more listenable.
Thank you. And the next question from Peter Georgiev is, you always seem so excited about every idea and story you pitch or report. How do you keep your enthusiasm as a journalist to find and explore new issues and topics?
I get so excited. I'm not sure. It's funny. I do think that enthusiasm for me is a very good, I just try to be I try to listen hard to myself, whether I'm actually excited about something or not. And then I try to clear all the stuff I'm not actually excited to off the table entirely. And I try to just, put stories on the table, pluck only the flowers that I think that smell nice, and that will keep me mesmerized, and it's like that to me, I don't know, it's just like asking yourself continually and very brutally honestly, am I still interested in this story or not? Is this interesting or not? I've seen 100 stories like this. Why is this one interesting, whereas the other ones are not? What is this one teaching me? What is the thing what is the assumption that I had my whole life that is just totally being upturned by this story? What is the thing that I cannot believe I did not know? I'm 35 years old. For 35 years, I did not know this thing until now. How is that possible? It's kind of that feeling. Like I feel like it's like those are the things that I get excited about, and then I kind of apply those questions pretty rigorously and pretty constantly to the stories that I have, and so I sort of sift out the stuff I'm not actually excited about, and then when I do have something I'm excited about, I give myself to it, and I just let it take me wherever it will until my sort of enthusiasm fuel runs out. Then I'm like, then I toss it aside. But as long as you're kind of it's a kind of love. Like you fall in love with a story, and you have to kind of chase it. And it doesn't mean that it's a beautiful, happy story, or it's a like it could be a story like this. That's it's a horrible, tragic story. It's a complicated story. It's a messy story. But even then, it's like find the things that you think are not obvious, the things that you and try to kind of remember that feeling when you first heard this story, and how, the notes it played in you, and kind of keep that and use that. Another really good trick, like this is a good trick I tell to other journalists who, especially if you're doing kind of long form stories, it's hard to keep that enthusiasm up as you have a story over like, and even not if you're doing it over 3 years, but a trick I would use, which I guess is much harder now in the age of COVID, but a trick I would use is go outside, meet a stranger, it could be like in line at the grocery store or whatever. Or it could be a friend that you just haven't talked to in a long time and have never told about the story, and tell them this story that you're working on, that you're excited about, and watch their eyes like light up or not light up, or just you kind of demo it in a way for somebody. And when you do that, what you'll notice is you'll hear the story afresh through that person's ears. And the things that person is getting excited about, the questions they have will help you, but then also the excitement that they have will also help you. And if it's blowing their mind the same way that it blew your mind when you first heard about it, that's like the easiest way to get a hit of that, memory of, oh yeah, I forgot that was so surprising, because now I've been sitting with this story for so long, but that was actually really surprising. How could that possibly be? And then and then you can kind of and then it makes it much easier to kind of ride that wave of enthusiasm, because you just got that sort of booster. Mixing metaphors. You got that booster shot from the stranger, or from your friend. So it's just like constantly getting at strategic intervals, like a new burst of like clear eyes or fresh energy, that you can like a vampire, you can sort of suck it a little bit and then use that as your fuel to keep going. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have 2 minutes left, but maybe a short answer to this last question from Teodora Barzakova. She wants to know whether podcasts give freedom to journalists to express their opinions more freely, be it Guantanamo or other politics or whatever the issue is, compared to other formats or other like forms of reporting.
I think every medium has its own freedoms and limitations and ways that it locks you in. For me, I think podcasts, there are a number of things. One is space. It gives you, like, you can make things as many episodes as you want. You can go on for as long as you want. You can trim things here or there, like that space. You're not hitting exact broadcast clock. You don't need a commercial break at exactly the same place. Like that's a really liberating kind of a thing. Another really liberating thing, I think, is that you can't see the people. So unlike documentary film, I think so often our eyes are so judgy. Our eyes are so judgmental, and hearing somebody, I think there's a tremendous amount of freedom that you gain of the listener's sort of empathy in a way, like where you're like, I can make you care about someone who, if you just saw on the street, you might not care about. Whereas if you hear them through your own, like reverberating through your own skull, you actually will care about them in a totally different way. So I think in those ways in particular, those are kind of the two biggest ones, I think, where it's like, there is a tremendous amount of freedom there. Like those two things, they can unlock things that in a lot of other mediums, in a lot of other kind of formats, are a lot harder to crack.
I agree. I mean, that's why I find myself sometimes walking on the street crying or laughing out loud, depending on what kind of podcast I'm listening to. Latif, it's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much for being with us. It was very interesting. Of course, I wish I could keep asking you questions, but I know that
Thank
you have.
And to everybody in the audience, if you like, as I saw that there were more questions that I wasn't able to answer, please feel free to email me. My email address is on my website. Please get in touch. I think this is such a wonderful medium, and I just want to encourage everybody who's just getting into it to really give it a shot, because it's a wonderful, beautiful thing, and and I think there's so much exciting work. It's a golden age. There's so much exciting work going on right now, and I'm so excited about this festival that's showcasing so much of it.
Thank you so much. And your stories has been an inspiration for many, I'm sure. Plus, if you haven't, I think you should read Latif's post about how to find story ideas. It's great, especially for podcast newbies or people who want to start or improve their own podcast. So that's great. Latif, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope someday we'll have a chance to welcome you in Sofia in person continue this conversation. Yeah, please. I cannot wait. I'm counting the days. So invite me next year or whenever, and I'll be there. Oh, be careful. I might take you up on that offer. So expect more emails from me. But I do hope to meet one day in person. In the meantime, we will keep listening to Radiolab stories. Thank you so much. For the audience, don't go anywhere. We'll have a 10-minute break just so we allow the next batch of amazing speakers to join us. We'll have a very interesting discussion with a colleague of Latif, actually. Tracy Hunt will be here with us, rough translation, Gregory Warner, and Anna Bwagova, who started one of the first narrative podcasts in Bulgaria. Stay tuned. We'll be back in 10 minutes. Again, don't go anywhere. And Latif, again, thank you so much. My pleasure. What a lineup. All right. Bye.